Joining me now is Stewart Rhodes. He's the founder of Oath Keepers. He's a former firearms instructor, as well as a former member of Representative Ron Paul's Washington, D.C. staff. He's also been an outspoken critic of President Bush and the Obama administration's violations of the Constitution. He joins us today to talk about a new recording that has come to light by True TV about John McCain's entire career, essentially proving it was built on lies and deceptions. Stewart Rhodes, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Also want to point out that I served as a paratrooper in the Army, so this is kind of relevant given the topic.
Now, you guys put out an email. I'm on your email list, so I'm well abreast of all your activities. I saw this come out. I said, oh my goodness, John McCain. I've always known there's been criticisms about him, but we're going to play the clip for the folks who are watching right now in just a minute. But tell me briefly, what does this clip mean? Sort of set it up for us.
Well, for many years, there were allegations from other POWs that McCain, they nicknamed him Songbird, that he had done recordings for the North Vietnamese while he was a POW, and of course he denied it. The only thing he ever admitted doing was under duress signing a confession of crimes against the North Vietnamese. His Silver Star commendation reads as though he had successfully resisted attempts to coerce him and use him for propaganda, and he was, in the citation, it says that his firm resistance to his attempts was an inspiration to the other prisoners. Well, in reality, he recorded a propaganda broadcast for the North Vietnamese, which was broadcast all over North Vietnam and also in the prison, and was used to destroy the morale of the men around him. But that was all brushed under the rug, and now, of only just the other day, this recording was found, somehow misfiled in the National Archives. But it was found by the True News people who were digging for this, and lo and behold, he was Songbird. And so his entire career has been based on a pumped up, grossly misrepresented hero status for John McCain, which was just not reality.
All right, we're going to go play that clip. And folks, just bear with us because we are talking to Stewart via Skype, and there can be some sort of lag or delay sometimes. So bear with us through some of those technical issues. Now let's go to that clip real quick here, Stewart, and let the folks judge for themselves what they're about to hear. Now this is an old recording, remember, from back in the 70s.
1969.
69, excuse me, 69. So it's going to be old, it's going to be crackly, it's not going to be some beautifully crafted MP3. So here, take a listen.
To the Vietnamese people and the government of the DRVN, from John Sidney McCain, 624787, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy, born 29 August 1936, Panama, home state, Ryan. Shot down 26 October 1967, A-4E aircraft. I, as a U.S. airman, am guilty of crimes against the Vietnamese country and people. I have bombed their cities, towns, and villages and caused many injuries, even death, to the people of Vietnam. I was captured in the capital city of Hanoi while attacking it. After I was captured, I was taken to the hospital in Hanoi, where I received very good medical treatment. I was given an operation on my leg, which allowed me to walk again, and a cast on my right arm, which was badly broken in 3 places. The doctors were very good, and they knew a great deal about the practice of medicine. I remained in the hospital for some time and regained much of my health and strength. Since I arrived in the camp of detention, I have received humane and lenient treatment. I received discount treatment and food even though I came here as an aggressor, and the people who I injured have much difficulty in their living standards. I wish to express my deep gratitude for my kind treatment, and I will never forget this.
All right, there it was, the infamous recording that was misfiled somewhere in the National Archives. First of all, that's the biggest red flag for me. Here we have a guy, he's been a senator, he's run for office. He certainly could have just been the Manchurian candidate for Obama when he ran for president. But first of all, why? Why did they misfile this thing, and why is it suddenly showing up?
This was a recording by the CIA, which monitored all of the North Vietnamese radio transmissions. And like you said, if you misfile it, you misfile something and let the person know it's been misfiled, but you still have it, that's covering it up and setting it aside, but you can also pull it right back out and use it against them, which is exactly the kind of leverage you want to have over a politician throughout his entire career. But even if that wasn't the case, even if it was a sincere mistake somehow on the CIA's part, the main point is that, look, anyone can break under torture or pressure if he was actually tortured. We don't know if that's true. But let's say a guy was. Let's say many of the guys that were there for years did break. Fine. You can forgive them. We can understand it. Go on with your life. But then to get a silver medal citation, silver star citation, and then build a political career on a lie that you had been this stalwart, unbreakable prisoner under torture, when the truth is exactly the opposite, that you broke and did a recording for the enemy, which harmed our war effort. To build that career on that lie, just, to me is unacceptable. I don't care if a guy just goes on and lives like a normal Joe, but then to go on and take this false accolade of being a hero and then build your entire career on it. And you can't criticize him. Oh, you'll criticize John McCain as a national treasure. He's a war hero. And so just give him deference and respect that he didn't actually deserve. He's no better than the other average prisoners. In fact, he's quite the opposite. He actually did something that a lot of them did not do. A true hero was James Stockdale, who was tortured. And in fact, he beat his own face with a stool to beat it up and swell it up. So the Vietnamese could not use him for propaganda. They wanted to parade him around in this little fake, sanitized village in front of the news crews, and he beat his face so badly that they couldn't do it. They couldn't use him. So here's a guy that hurt himself and in his own life to make sure it could not be used for propaganda. And he was the true inspiration for all his men, not John McCain.
Now, how did John McCain violate the soldiers' code of conduct here?
Well, by making statements that are against the war effort and hurt our efforts and help the enemy. You do a propaganda video. It's not that he disclosed he did give up military information, but apparently the military information he gave wasn't that important. But the big thing is he made that propaganda audio. When you do that, you're aiding the enemy. That's what you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to make any statements or confessions that will aid the enemy. So, for example, it says here, I will make no oral or written statement disloyal to my country and allies or harmful to their cause. So by getting on there and saying I'm a war criminal and I've harmed the Vietnamese and I'm the aggressor, that's just feeding right into their propaganda of the United States as the aggressor, and it hurt the war effort. So plain and simple, a violation of the code of conduct.
So what are the ramifications for this? I mean, the guy's at the end of his career,
None.
and all of a sudden, this comes out. It's pretty convenient, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, he's 80 years old now, right? What are the ramifications? None. Would have been nice to know. It would have been, this is all basically false advertising in his entire life. Would have been nice to know that he had been actually the Songbird. Back in 2008, during the campaign, there were some veterans that came out and said, hey, look, here's what he did. He rolled over and he was a propaganda tool for the enemy. We consider him a traitor. And, of course, all of his defenders came in and said, these people are crazy. There's no truth to this. There's not a shred of evidence that he aided the enemy, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out he did. So all of that time, he's gotten away with a fabrication. So, but no, nothing's going to happen. No one apparently cares. The media is not covering this. The mainstream media is not covering this at all.
All right, Stewart, thanks for joining us to weigh in on this just a really shocking and heartbreaking revelation, I think, for a lot of people, because there are a lot of people who love John McCain. They think they hold him up in such high regard. But this is
I don't know why.
This is going to shatter their paradigm.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, frankly, for me, his wartime record is not why I can't stand John McCain. It's his record in the Senate. He's sponsored some of the most atrocious anti-constitutional measures. In fact, the worst ones passed in the Congress's history. Number one being the NDAA of 2012. He was the main sponsor of that, declaring that he can use extraordinary rendition that he can use military detention and military trial on U.S. citizens. You know, pretty much rubber stamping the entire doctrine of enemy combatant status. Obama has adopted and gone one better and begun to actually kill American citizens overseas. But John McCain wanted to codify that, and he did. He attached it to the National Defense Authorization Act, which no one wants to vote against because you're perceived as voting against the military. And because of his status as a war hero, everyone, you know, bowed down to John McCain's opinion on this, and he got this crap passed over all of our heads now. You know, it's a ticking time bomb. So eventually it'll be used here domestically against us.
Well,
and you can thank John McCain.
Let's not forget that infamous photograph of him in Syria arming all of the moderate terrorists there. And, of course, we know what happened there. The defection, the birth of ISIS, and the rest is history. So,
right. And let's not forget the wide open borders. I mean, he's known as McAmnesty for good reason, you know, John McAmnesty. Yeah. So he's an absolute enemy of the Constitution and the Republic in multiple ways, and he's a friggin' traitor on that alone. But hey, if it takes, you know, him being exposed as being a fraud hero to get some folks to wake up, well, fine. But it's too late now. Damage has been done.
Let's explore this for a little bit deeper for a second, because this is a Central Intelligence Agency recording that was misfiled. Is it possible then that they just held this over his head for all these years and said, look, you better go ahead. We'll make you the best senator in the world, but you got to go ahead and run through the New World Order agenda, or else we're going to burn you. We're going to release this recording and you're going to be done. Do you think that's a possibility?
Oh, yeah, I think it's highly likely. I mean, look what happened there. His father was an admiral. In fact, at the time, his father was the commander-in-chief of the entire Pacific Fleet. So that's part of the whitewash and the cover-up was his own father pulling the strings on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and in the DOD to not actually investigate the allegations against him by fellow prisoners. Total whitewash, you know, a fake poser Silver Star commendation, and then he's ushered into his political career. But absolutely, you hold it over his head, just like if you had caught him having sex with a little boy or something, right? You take pictures of him and you hold those and let them know it. Here they are, but we're going to hold on to these. Don't worry, they'll be taken care of. No one's going to see them as long as you do what's right, you know. And look, guys, ever since Kennedy was assassinated in particular, that was a friggin' coup. He was murdered by the CIA, and since then, the shadow government, CIA, NSA, etc., all of that has been in charge, and this is just another indicator. I think you're right.
All right, that was Oath Keepers Stewart Rhodes. Hit the link in the description to get on the Oath Keepers email list and to find out more. As always, I welcome your comments on this topic below, because guess what? You're not going to see this on the mainstream media, corporate control press. So hit that share button and push this out to your social media or your email list. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
And here's the most amazing thing about the S&L crisis of that period, is that in response to that crisis, and this was when people were gaming the system of federal deposit insurance to steal money, essentially, the response by lawmakers was to make that particular type of crime that was illegal, and over 1,500 people went to jail, bankers went to jail, as a result of the inquiry that after the savings and loan crisis. They changed the law so that that type of law breaking was made legal. And it set the stage for the 2008 subprime crisis. Subprime crisis of 2008 was a repeat of the savings and loan crisis. People ask, how come nobody went to jail? It's because after the savings and loan crisis from the 1989 period, the laws were changed to make that particular type of fraud legal.
Essentially, yes. The Lincoln Savings and Loans crisis was one of 747 S&Ls that collapsed. It cost in total, it cost $160.1 billion. Of that, $124.6 billion was paid by the U.S. taxpayer, and then the economy did go into recession in 1990 and 91. But here's another phrase, another quote that could be straight from what Donald Trump said when he was just a candidate Trump. Keating was hit with a $1.1 billion fraud and racketeering action filed against him by the regulators. In talking to reporters in April, Keating said, quote, One question among many raised in recent weeks had to do with whether my financial support in any way influenced several political figures to take up my cause. I want to say in the most forceful way I can, I certainly hope so.
Right. Another legacy of the S&L crisis was the beginning of the American oligarch class. Because remember, the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of busted banks, those assets were put into the Resolution Trust Corporation and then held by the government over a period of time and sold off for pennies on the dollar to the likes of people like Ron Perlman, who got that all tax-free and developed into a billionaire, and others who fed at the trough of the S&L fraud became really the basis for the American oligarch class that's still with us today and plundering the economy.
John McCain was cleared by a Senate investigation. Of course, many in the media then said, well, can you have senators investigate themselves? It was all senators being tried. Most of them were, 3 of them dropped out and no longer were senators after they didn't run in the next election. But John McCain, according to the article, after 1999, the only member of the Keating Five remaining in the U.S. Senate was John McCain, who had an easier time gaining re-election in 1992 than he anticipated. He survived the political scandal in part by becoming friendly with the political press.
Well, he became the bagman for Wall Street. And he saw in the 2008 subprime crisis, most famously you saw in the Enron collapse. And John McCain and his Republican cohorts like the Bush family and others were very cozy with Ken Lay, who financed the Bush campaigns and the Bush presidency. And when they got caught committing massive fraud on the same scale as the savings and loan crisis, the machinery was already in place, thanks to John McCain, who's the bagman for Wall Street for decades, to bail those guys out and make them whole at the expense of the democracy/economy of the United States, which is disintegrating.
But again, I want to repeat that sentence because I really think it's quite shocking, because it was quite shocking after his death, the uniform, assessment by the U.S. corporate media that he was this great hero and only a great hero and can't say anything negative about it. He survived the political scandal in part by becoming friendly with the political press. So he continued that all the way for the next 20, 30 years, where he would have the press come to his house, and he was a good guy. He makes great hot dogs. He has a great barbecue. How can you possibly think anything negative about him? We see the same thing on the financial corporate media here. They're good friends with Jamie Dimon. They're good friends with Lloyd Blankfein. How can you be hard on these guys? Because they're good guys. They invite you out to their home in the Hamptons. They are so charming. They're great hosts. How can you possibly really go too hard on them? Like, John McCain, you shouldn't have done that. And you could see that in the interviews that Chris Hayes gives for Eric Holder versus our interview with Eric Holder. Eric Holder was just recently interviewed on Chris Hayes' show, and it was a softball question after softball question. He tried to do 1 or 2 little hard questions, but quickly backed off when Eric Holder didn't give him a great answer.
All you need to know about John McCain is that Warren Beatty was a pallbearer. Okay, so here's a guy who is friendly with the press, who's a media bore, another word that starts with W, John McCain, who at his own funeral is playing Hollywood games by having Warren Beatty as a pallbearer. I mean, I would have loved to have been the call to Warren from his agent, like, Warren, we got a job for you.
No, apparently they were very, very old friends, so they were good friends. But
I'm sure.
The other interesting thing was that John McCain's lawyer at the time was John Dowd, who then became Trump's lawyer. There were a few people that were involved back then in the S&L crisis, getting all these senators and everybody absolved. The powerful people who did not go to prison at that time. They had these lawyers that are still in power now. But also the other legacy of John McCain is he was a war hawk, despite what the media might have said. They call it heroism and a great patriot, but and many people in the world might consider it war hawkism. So I want to see, like, it does work. Obviously, America is very powerful. They have a huge army. And our dollar, since 1973, by the way, when the John McCain returned to America from a prisoner of war camp, which was a horrific experience, and he was horribly tortured, but he returned in March of 1973, right about the time that basically we had the petrodollar, beginning of the petrodollar. So after 40 years, we've had a lot of hubris, and a lot of war hawks and neocons demand that we use that as a weapon. So the dollar has been weaponized, and it's the likes of John McCain and all the neocons around him that we lead to this headline here from CNBC. The anti-dollar awakening could be ruder and sooner than most economists predict. The United States is currently waging economic warfare against 1/10 of the world's countries, with cumulative population of nearly 2 billion people and combined gross domestic product of more than $15 trillion. These include Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Sudan, Zimbabwe, Myanmar, the Democratic Republic of Congo, North Korea, and others on which Washington has imposed sanctions over the years, but also countries like China, Pakistan, and Turkey, which are not under full sanctions, but rather targets of other punitive economic measures.
Right. The dollar is an instrument of war. It's been weaponized.
It's been weaponized.
And the empire that is the U.S. is expanded and controlled through the world's dependence on dollars to survive. And that's the post-World War II order. That's the legacy of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And this is what countries are now fighting to get out of this constraint, out of this chokehold of the dollar.
So I want to say that this is the sort of neocon hubristic sort of what is called patriotism by some after John McCain's death and all of the obituaries for him. But some could say it's called imperialism. From the outside, they might see it as very aggressive and neocon-like. And we here on Keiser Report have warned of this, but this is CNBC saying it, and we've never even put that into context of just how much of the world's economy is under sanctions by the U.S. Because from a U.S. perspective, each one of the economic entities is targeted for a good reason, be it human rights violations, terrorism, crime, nuclear trade, corruption, or in the case of China, unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. But in recent months, it seems that America's unwavering commitment to fight all of the world's scourges has brought all of those governments and the wealthy individuals who support them to a critical mass, joining forces to create a parallel financial system which would be out of reach of America's long arm. Should they succeed, the impact on America's global posture would be transformational.
Absolutely. And this is what we're on the cusp of a post-U.S. dollar hegemony world. And this is in transition right now. And this makes these very exciting days.
That's what I'm saying is like John McCain, yes, he was a patriot, he's a great patriot, and fight. Yeah, we're exercising our power. But you can only exercise your power responsibly. Otherwise, it comes back.
John McCain lit the fuse on the death of the dollar.
Yes, essentially.
And now his passing is coincidental with the dollar's passing, essentially. In the same 24-month period, John McCain and the U.S. dollar will both die.
Because you can only exercise that power once or twice. Our guest, Jim Rickards, has said this. As soon as they sanctioned people and cut them off SWIFT, that U.S. had the ultimate authority to do that. And as soon as they pulled the trigger, they set in motion an alternative to it. Because as soon as you do that, you have to have an alternative.